The province is announcing strict new penalties for impaired drivers caught behind the wheel. More measles cases confirmed throughout the GTA, with case numbers that we haven't seen in this province in a decade. And hydro crews are on the scene of a power outage downtown. We'll have the latest on who's affected and how long this outage is expected to last. Here's a live look. Good afternoon and welcome to CP24 Live at Noon. I'm Bakari Savage. We begin with breaking news. Aiden Platursky, the self-proclaimed crypto king from Whitby, has been arrested after allegedly running a Ponzi scheme worth more than $40 million. And court documents obtained by CTV News Toronto show Platursky was charged with fraud over $5,000 and money laundering on May 2nd before being released on bail yesterday. And several victims who invested with Platursky were notified of his arrest in an email obtained by CTV News Toronto from the Ontario Securities Commission this morning. Durham Police and the Ontario Securities Commission will be holding a news conference tomorrow to announce the results of Project Swan, focused on Platursky's criminal activity. Well, Toronto Hydro is responding to a large power outage downtown. Here's a live look. The outage occurred after a transformer pole caught fire near George and King Streets. Again, this is a live look at the scene, and Toronto Hydro estimates that about 65,000 or 6,500 customers are currently without electricity. And there's no word yet on when power will be restored. Impaired drivers could soon face stiffer penalties under newly proposed legislation from the Ford government. And CP24's Courtney Hills is following this story and joins us live from North York with more. Courtney.
And Bakari, we heard from police today talking about how big of an issue this is, impaired driving on Ontario roads, saying 1 in 3 traffic fatalities the result of impaired driving. So the government says they are going to be cracking down on those who decide to drink or do drugs and get behind the wheel. What was announced today, they say anybody convicted of impaired driving causing death will be looking at a lifetime driving ban, and anybody, a first-time offender when it comes to impaired driving, required to put a breathalyzer in your car. We'll let you hear more from the Minister of Transportation on why they are taking this next step, and also from drivers who we talked to about the changes.
The consequences will be real here. Never being able to drive again if you get behind the wheel and cause death is a serious consequence for an individual. If you are charged with impaired driving, you will have a mandatory interlock device that you cannot get away from. In the instances, we are also ensuring that you will have mandatory remedial training upon first offense as well. So these are some of the measures that we're leading the country with as well.
It is a concern, and I 100% support these restrictions.
Do you think it would make someone think twice?
Yes. Any penalty should be a meaningful penalty. So I agree with that. Yeah.
Before somebody starts the car, actually they have to test before getting to the vehicle. Mm-hmm. So that's a good idea. Yeah.
Impaired driving is a very big problem because I see it every day because I work on the highways and I work on the municipal roads, and I see that people are just you got a slap on the wrist basically for driving impaired and stuff like that. So it's a good law that they're coming up with, I hope it helps.
And there were also members of the organization Mothers Against Drunk Driving as part of this announcement earlier today. These are people who are directly impacted by the tragic consequences of impaired driving, saying that this is a step in the right direction, that often they hear from victims who just can't believe that somebody who might be responsible for the death of a loved one is able to get in their vehicle and drive away. So they say this is a good move that is being made. The legislation, Bakari, is going to be introduced tomorrow at Queen's Park. Over to you.
Okay, CP24's Courtney Hills. Thank you. Well, OPP say that traffic fatalities on provincially patrolled roads hit a 15-year high in 2023. Police say that 411 people died in collisions last year. That marks the first time that the number of fatalities exceeded 400 since 2007. OPP's West region was the most impacted, with 106 deaths, while 52 were in the GTA. And police say reckless driving, distracted driving, and alcohol were the leading factors. OPP covers more than 127,000 kilometers of roads all across the province. One person was injured in an overnight shooting in East York. This happened around 3 o'clock in the morning near Cosburn and Cedarville Avenue, east of Woodbine. And police say that a man was found suffering from life-threatening injuries. He was rushed to the hospital, but paramedics say that the victim's injuries are now considered non-life-threatening. There's still no word on suspects. And Hamilton police are trying to identify a pair of suspects who were involved in a gunfight in the city earlier this week. Investigators, they've released these photos that you see right now of the men that they're looking for. They say that the two fired shots at someone driving a Nissan just before 5 o'clock Monday evening. The driver then started shooting back. Both suspects are described as being in their early 20s, and they were carrying black satchels. No description of the driver has been released. NDP MPP Catherine Fife discussed her bill, Lydia's Law, which aims to revamp the court system so that survivors of sexual assault can get justice.
Why are rapists walking free in Ontario? We deserve to know. He must be, the Attorney General would have to table this in the legislature. It would go to Justice Committee for actions, and it would impact funding and resourcing for the court system. Lydia's Law also compels the Attorney General to review the efficiency, the effectiveness of the Victim Quick Response Program, and as well as the Independent Legal Advice Program.
It's well known that many survivors of sexual violence feel re-victimized by our criminal justice system. Many survivors fear not being taken seriously or believed. Many hesitate to report for very good reasons. Even when they do report, conviction rates for sexual assault remains low. Low convictions give the erroneous impression that sexual assault is a rare crime. Many misconceptions about sexual assault persist in our communities, funded by these low conviction rates.
Kate Alexander is a sexual assault survivor and advocate, and she shared her experience and called for the changes to the justice system to better serve victims.
I was silent for years because I had just turned 18. I was incredibly scared, and I feared future career repercussions. And then another survivor reached out to me on Facebook. To this day, we've never spoken any details to each other. We don't need to. We all know what he did. To my knowledge, 12 women came forward about him with eerily identical statements. Chamberlain was found guilty on multiple counts of sexual assault against multiple victims and finally incarcerated in March 2020. That marks 8 years after he was charged.
Lydia's Law was supposed to have a second reading yesterday and a third reading today, but the government voted to send it to committee instead. Well, the province is looking to make changes to how it compensates injured migrant workers. The Workplace Safety and Insurance Board normally pays workers 85% of their salary if they get hurt on the job and cannot return to their previous role. However, it claws back money earned from other work. The WSIB's president says that's not fair to migrant workers who return home after injury and usually earn much less in their countries. He says that the board is reviewing 50 claims and will likely pay out millions in retroactive compensation. And Ontario's economic growth is expected to remain slow in 2024. So according to the latest report by the Financial Accountability Office, this is what's being said. The impact of higher interest rates on household spending and business investment, that's the main factor. The FAO projects a budget deficit of $900 million this year, which will widen to $6.4 billion next year. Ontario will not see a budget surplus until 2029. That's 2 years after the government expected. The FAO says that economic growth could be affected by ongoing geopolitical risks or if inflation and interest rates remain high for longer than expected. And measles infections in Ontario, they are at their highest level in a decade. CP24 CJ Liu is following the story and joins us live from Trillium Health Partners in Mississauga. CJ.
Hi, Bakari. As of last week, there were more than 20 cases of measles across the province. The last time numbers were this high was back in 2014. And we just got word yesterday that there is another confirmed case of measles, this one in the Peel region. Health officials say it's an adult. They don't know how they contracted the virus, but they are beginning to do some contact tracing and have released a list of public locations where exposure is possible, including here at the Trillium Health Partners in Mississauga, the emergency emergency room. If you were here on May 10th at 9:15 or May 11th at 6:15 at night, you are being told to contact Peel Public Health immediately. Another possible place of exposure is the Silver Creek Convenience and Healthcare Medical Clinic. If you were there on May 10th between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m., you are also asked to contact health officials. Now, this all comes as measles cases in the province near a 10-year high. As of last week, there have been 21 confirmed cases in Ontario. The last time we had this many cases was in 2014, where we had 22 cases. Now, as of this year, more than half of these cases are found in children. The majority of those kids were unimmunized. So health officials are definitely reminding people to get their vaccine. Now, this push for measles isn't something new. We heard just a couple months ago during the March break that there was a global resurgence of measles and that anyone who is traveling should be extra cautious and get vaccinated. And just a reminder, symptoms can appear as early as 7 days after contracting the virus. And of course, health officials are reminding everyone that the vaccine is free and it's available for anyone in Ontario. Bakari?
CP24, CJ Liu, live from Trillium Health Partners in Mississauga. Thank you. Well, a Quebec judge has rejected McGill University's request for an injunction to remove the pro-Palestinian encampment on the university's downtown Montreal campus. It's the second injunction request which has been denied after two students requested a similar court authorization. The injunction sought to dismantle the encampment on McGill's lower field, citing health and safety concerns at the encampment, which was first set up April 27th. The court did not find sufficient grounds to justify an injunction, but requested the plaintiffs make specific modifications to the application and refile the request. Well, coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, there is another update for Apple users. Tech analyst Carmen Levy joins us next to help break that down. It's after the break. Apple has just released its latest software update, another update, which includes some security enhancements along with other features. Tech analyst Carmen Levy joins us live with more. What this means for Apple users as well as others. Okay, Carmen, what update number is this?
This is 17.5. So because it's a 0.0 or 0.5 update, it's a fairly significant update. Of course, we're still waiting for iOS 18 later this year. We're going to hear details on it in June at the Worldwide Developers Conference. It'll be available for download in September, but the 17 version still has major updates coming between now and then. And this one is a pretty big one that we're going to want to pay attention to.
Okay, so along those lines, we're talking about a lot of security measures, but Apple still is a little bit vague as to what exactly the security measures are.
Yeah, it's almost like walking a tightrope, Bakari, because on the one hand, they want to share with iPhone users what the risks are so that they know it's urgent. You've got to make sure that you're updating it so that you slam the door on anyone who would use those vulnerabilities to attack. But at the same time, you don't want to give away too much. You don't want to share what you know with the cyber criminal community and give them more ability to kind of break in. So they're deliberately vague, but what we do know is that vulnerabilities have been discovered that allow attackers to execute code remotely, to find your location, to perhaps access data that they probably shouldn't be accessing. So whatever it is, it really doesn't matter. The message for end users is whenever Apple has an update available, go into your settings and make sure that you are set to auto download and install it, because if you aren't, you're leaving yourself unnecessarily vulnerable.
But Carmen, it seems like every update is essential. And I know some people who they are quite a few updates behind. Does that matter?
It certainly does, because cyber criminals know full well that devices that haven't been updated are easier to attack than devices that have. And the longer you let that go, the more updates you ignore or skip, the wider that door becomes, the more of a target, the easy target you become. And so this really is kind of a problem in this day and age. It doesn't matter what device you have, whether it's your smartphone, your tablet, your laptop, your smart watch, you've got to make sure that you're going into the settings and making sure that auto update is always set to on, and then you periodically go back into the settings to make sure that it's still working, because the longer you leave those updates kind of sitting there waiting to be installed, the worse it gets for you.
And Carmi, what about those Droid users?
It applies no matter what kind of device you have. So you'll hear the same message from Google, which of course is responsible for the Android operating system, the world's most popular mobile operating system. So do the same thing there. If you're an Android user, go into your settings, turn auto update on. Also applies in Windows. If you have a Wear OS watch, a wearable, any device that connects to the internet will have updates available for it. It's on you to make sure that the app is configured accordingly, whether it's from Apple, Google, Microsoft, or any other company.
Okay, tech analyst Carmi Levy, just do the update. Thanks, Carmi.
Thanks, Makari.
Well, PWHL Toronto will have another chance to advance to the finals as the team gets ready for Game 4. It's happening tonight in Minnesota.
Chances, one just missed the net. There, Budarak feeds it down. Now a chance. Flaherty, she scores!
Toronto's coming off a 2-0 loss on Monday, but still leads the best-of-5 series 2-1. All 3 games have been won by the home team in a shutout. Game 5 would be back here in Toronto Friday night, and the winner of the series will play Boston, who won last night in overtime to sweep their series against Montreal. Well, Toronto's going to be without the league's leading scorer for the rest of the playoffs. The team has placed Natalie Spooner on the long-term injured reserve, and Spooner suffered a knee injury during the third period of Game 3 against Minnesota. The 33-year-old led the league with 20 goals and 27 points in 24 regular season games. She had 1 goal and 1 assist in 3 playoff games. Well, the Caitlin Clark era in the WNBA has officially started.
Henley. Here's Clark, a good look from 3. She got it!
Look at that. Clark hitting her first 3-pointer late in the second quarter after missing her first 4 attempts. After the slow start, she settled down and finished with 20 points, though her Indiana Fever lost 92-71 to the Connecticut Sun. And Clark is the U.S. Women's College all-time scoring leader.
Thought it was physical. I don't know. Obviously, it wasn't like the best start in the first half for myself. Getting into foul trouble, and then you got to sit on the bench and try to come back into the game and get into a little bit of a flow. But obviously, too many turnovers. That's not going to get the job done. But I think just a lot of things to learn from. I didn't think we played well, and we had cut it to 6 in the third quarter. So I think that's a positive you look at. Like, we really did not play a good game, but we were right there at moments, and then it kind of got away from us at the end of the third and fourth quarter. Didn't have the greatest start, so I think just a lot to learn from.
Clark's going to make her home debut tomorrow. That's when the Fever hosts the New York Liberty. Well, the Jays and Orioles will try to wrap up their series this afternoon in Baltimore. The Jays won Monday night's opener in extra innings, but last night's game was rained out. That game is going to be made up as part of a doubleheader July 29th. Yusei Kikuchi is scheduled to start for the Jays this afternoon. The first pitch is set for 12:35. And coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, a dream catcher that could be a record breaker. We're going to have more on the man from an Ontario First Nation behind the ambitious attempt. The Parker Lake wildfire continues to threaten Fort Nelson, BC, forcing evacuations. For the latest, we're joined live from Fort St. John by CTV's Andrew Johnson. Andrew.
Yeah, it's tense times in Fort St. John for more than 2,000 people from Fort Nelson who have been evacuated here since Friday. Meanwhile, the giant fire burning near their homes, the 84 square kilometer fire you mentioned, is being held off for now. We're in a critical 48-hour period when fire officials thought those flames could approach homes, but winds expected to develop pushing the fire that way did not materialize, which was really a break for the 69 firefighters, including structure protection specialists, they're called, and 19 helicopters they're throwing at this fire to get a bit of an upper hand. Now, today is expected to be unpredictable in terms of the winds. There may be rain in the forecast. Really, it's hard to say what's going to happen next. And for the people evacuated in Fort St. John who had to get out in a hurry and are wondering what they're going to have to go back to, it's a very trying time.
And Andrew, along with the evacuations, what if people choose to not adhere to those?
Well, interesting you should ask that. About 50 people remained in Fort Nelson against this evacuation order. Many of them have been updating people who did evacuate via social media. And that's the way some information and video is getting out from Fort Nelson. It's from these people who stayed behind. There are others who stayed behind who may be involved in property crime or looting. Looting hasn't been confirmed. RCMP confirmed there has been property crime and they've made arrests. So some people stayed behind to look after their properties or businesses. Some are sending updates to people who aren't in town. Others seem to be there for nefarious reasons. There's only a few dozen of them in what's currently a ghost town with everyone else gone. And police, of course, are watching the area very closely.
Okay. CTV's Andrew Johnson live from Fort St. John with the latest on the wildfires and the evacuations. Thank you, Andrew.
Take care.
And a man from a First Nation in Ontario has built what he believes could be a record-breaking dream catcher. So Rama's Bob Williams has been making dream catchers since the 90s. He decided to try and make the biggest one in the world when he found out that the record belonged to Europe. His is 20 meters tall and 13 meters wide. He submitted the paperwork to Guinness last week. Well, the Westminster Kennel Club dog show in New York, it has named its best in show. And the winner, the black miniature poodle named Sage. So Sage is a 3-year-old from Houston, Texas, and clearly a crowd favorite and represented the non-sporting group at a fitting ending. This was the pup's final show of her long career. And Sports Illustrated has announced a special edition of their swimsuit issue in honor of the franchise's 60th anniversary. The sports magazine has called back past and present icons such as Chrissy Teigen, Hunter McGrady, and Kate Upton, and Gayle King, who will appear on 4 separate covers. Martha Stewart will also be among the 52 models included in the special edition. A swimsuit issue hits newsstands May 17th. And coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, the province is announcing new measures to combat impaired driving. We're going to break that down for you next. The province is announcing strict new penalties for impaired drivers caught behind the wheel. More measles cases confirmed throughout the GTA, with case numbers that we haven't seen in this province in a decade. And hydro crews are on the scene of a power outage downtown. Here's a live look. You can see traffic lights are not working. We're going to have the latest on who is affected and how long this outage is expected to last. Good afternoon and welcome to CP24 Live at noon. I'm Bakari Savage. We begin with breaking news. Aiden Platursky, the self-proclaimed crypto king from Whitby, has been arrested after allegedly running a Ponzi scheme worth more than $40 million. In court documents obtained by CTV News Toronto show Platursky was charged with fraud over $5,000 and money laundering and was released on bail yesterday. Several victims who invested with Platursky were notified of his arrest in an email obtained by CTV News Toronto from the Ontario Securities Commission this morning. Durham Police and the Ontario Securities Commission will be holding a news conference tomorrow to announce the results of Project Swan, focused on Platursky's criminal activity. Well, Toronto Hydro is responding to a large power outage downtown. Here's a live look at the scene right now. The outage occurred after a transformer pole caught fire near George and King Streets. This is the intersection right here. Toronto Hydro estimates about 6,500 customers are currently without electricity. There's no word yet on when power is going to be restored. Impaired drivers could soon face stiffer penalties under newly proposed legislation from the Ford government. And CP24's Courtney Hills is following the story and joins us live from North York with more. Courtney.
Hey, Bakari, and we heard from the transportation minister earlier today on this, saying that the province is really concerned about the impaired driving officers are seeing out on the roads. 1 in 3 fatal accidents involves an impaired driver. That's why they say they're really cracking down here, introducing stiffer penalties. What will be new as part of this legislation, someone who was convicted of impaired driving causing death will be looking at a lifetime driving ban. And somebody, in a first offense when it comes to impaired driving, they'd be required to install a device that's essentially a breathalyzer. So something that you would have to blow into to show the car that you are sober before the engine starts and you're able to drive away. We'll let you hear from the transportation minister on why they are taking these next steps. We also got reaction from drivers.
Too many families in Ontario have had their lives torn apart, families torn apart by the careless and shameful actions of an impaired driver. There is no excuse for driving drunk, and there is always a choice to plan ahead, phone a friend, call a cab, or take public transit. We're past the time for making excuses.
I think it's a good idea because there are so many accidents involved with the impaired driving, you know. So it is a good idea.
Do you think stiffer penalties will make someone think twice?
I'm not sure. I can't say anything, but I think it is true.
Should someone lose their license if they're found guilty of impaired driving causing death, you think?
Yeah, depending on the situation.
Scary, though, as a driver, right?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
You just got to keep watching all the time, you know.
Something else the province was talking about, they are going to make education and treatment available for people who are also found guilty of impaired driving. What we also heard earlier today at Bakari, the fact that this is the second of a number of announcements the province has been making, trying to keep the roads safer. Just yesterday, they announced tougher penalties for people found guilty of auto theft. And the transportation minister also hinted at another announcement coming tomorrow. We obviously don't know what that is. We'll watch and wait to see what they have to say on that. But the legislation, when it comes to this specific part, the fact that they are going to be cracking down on impaired drivers in this province, set to be introduced tomorrow. Over to you.
Okay, CP24's Courtney Hills, thank you. Well, OPP say that traffic fatalities on provincially patrolled roads hit a 15-year high in 2023. And police say 411 people died in collisions last year, marking the first time the number of fatalities exceeded 400 since 2007. OPP's West region was the most impacted, with 106 deaths, while 52 were in the GTA. And police say reckless driving, distracted driving, and alcohol were the leading factors. OPP covers more than 127,000 kilometers of roads all across the province. One person was injured in an overnight shooting in East York. This happened around 3 o'clock in the morning near Cosburn and Cedarville Avenue, just east of Woodbine. And police say the man was found suffering from life-threatening injuries and was rushed to hospital. Paramedics say that the victim's injuries are now considered non-life-threatening, but there's no word on any suspects. In Hamilton, police, they're trying to identify a pair of suspects who were involved in a gunfight in the city earlier this week. Investigators have released the photos that you are looking at on your screen right now. This is of the men that they're looking for. They say that the two fired shots at someone driving a Nissan just before 5 o'clock Monday evening. Well, the driver shot back. Both suspects are described as being in their early 20s, and they were carrying black satchels. No description of the driver has been released. Well, it's 12:35, 18 degrees. Let's get a check on the lunch hour rush on the roads with Adjua and Cia Bois. Adj?
Yeah, good afternoon, Bakari. We are dealing with quite a few issues during this lunch hour if you're making your way out. We'll start with problems slowing down the commute on the southbound 427 happening in the Express south of Rathburn. Crews dealing with a stalled vehicle that does have the left lane as well as the shoulder block. So it's pretty busy in the Express. You can't avoid it by sticking with those collector lanes. Gardner pretty jammed into and out of the downtown core. Again, it's because of the long-term road work. We had slow-moving maintenance crews just out of camera view. It looks like it's around the bend just south of Dundas, actually on the approach to Richmond. They're picking up garbage in the right shoulder, so they blocked the right lane. So this is why it's been slow pretty much for the late morning. The backup does extend from before Bayview. Bloor Bayview Extension, a good alternative. And if you're on the 401 westbound, some delays from the DVP all the way to Yonge on the westbound side. Outside of camera view in York, crews on scene of a collision on Weston Road just north of Lawrence. I'll send it back to you, Bakari.
The CP24 traffic report is brought to you by capitaldirect.ca.
NDP and PP Catherine Fife discussed her bill, Lydia's Law, which aims to revamp the court system so that survivors of sexual assault can get justice.
The number of sexual assault cases that are thrown out in Ontario, in 2022, 1,326 sexual assault cases were stayed. In 2023, 1,171 sexual assault cases were stayed. They were thrown out. We don't know why, but we deserve to know why. Some of the headlines around our justice system are heartbreaking. Just last week, another case was thrown out. Another sexual assault case was thrown out just last week.
In 2016, the Supreme Court of Canada decision R versus Jordan established deadlines for when a trial must be completed. Since the Jordan ruling came into effect, 86 Ontario sexual assault cases have been thrown out due to delays. This is a growing issue in our court system across Ontario. Thinking about these cases, the injustice experienced by those survivors feels overwhelming to me, and it should feel overwhelming to everyone in Ontario and completely unacceptable.
Kate Alexander is a sexual assault survivor and advocate, and she shared her experience and called for the changes to the justice system to better serve victims.
Nearly a third of my life, almost the entirety of my 20s, spent navigating the criminal court system. Worse to say, under current law, Chapter 11B of the Charter Rights, Jordan's rule, the case almost certainly would have been tossed out. Chamberlain free to keep abusing because we still don't have enough judges and staff hired in our courtrooms. The psychological scars of abuse are profound, leading to life-threatening long-term consequences. Young survivors are disproportionately vulnerable to further abuse, a testament to the neurobiological changes wrought by trauma.
Lydia's law was supposed to have a second reading yesterday and a third reading today, but the government voted to send it to committee instead. Well, the province is looking to make changes to how it compensates injured migrant workers. The Workplace Safety and Insurance Board normally pays workers 85% of their salary if they get hurt on the job and can't return to their previous role. However, it claws back money earned from other work. The WSIB's president says that's not fair to migrant workers who return home after injury and usually earn much less in their countries. He says that the board is reviewing 50 claims and will likely pay out millions in retroactive compensation. And Ontario's economic growth is expected to remain slow in 2024. So according to the latest report by the Financial Accountability Office, this, along with the impact of higher interest rates on household spending and business investment, that's the main factor. The FAO projects a budget deficit of $900 million this year, which is going to widen to $6.4 billion next year. Ontario will not see a budget surplus until 2029. That's 2 years after the government expected. The FAO says that economic growth could be affected by ongoing geopolitical risks or if inflation and interest rates remain high for longer than expected. Measles infections in Ontario are at the highest level in a decade, and CP24's Sija Liu is following this story and joins us live from Trillium Health Partners in Mississauga. Sija.
Bakari, as of last week, there were more than 20 confirmed cases of measles, and numbers haven't been that high since 2014. And just yesterday, we got word that there is another confirmed case of measles in the Peel region, an adult from Mississauga. Peel Public Health don't know how this person contracted the virus, but they are working on contacting anyone who may have been exposed. They have also issued a public exposure alert for some of the areas where the public could have contracted the virus, including right here at the Trillium Health Center's Mississauga site, the emergency room. Now, if you were here on May 10th at 9:15 in the morning or May 11th at 6:15 at night, you may have been exposed to the virus, as well as if you were at the Silver Creek Convenience and Healthcare Medical Clinic on May 10th between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. Health officials are asking you to contact Peel Public Health immediately. Now, this all comes as measles cases in Ontario reach a 10-year high. As of last week, there were 21 confirmed cases of measles. More than half of the cases we saw this year were in children, the majority of those kids unimmunized. We spoke to some people outside of the hospital today. Fortunately, none of them have ever had measles, but they are on high alert amid this recent surge.
If you know someone have measles, you have to stay away from them, you know. You just don't stay with people who have measles or anybody that's sick. You stay away.
As a parent, and as we grow up like that, we tend to give the kids the one we got, right? So we have them vaccinated too.
When I was young, I used to hear about measles all the time. But now, I don't know. I got no idea. I'm just careful. I wear a mask once if it's necessary.
And just a reminder, health officials say measles are very contagious and can spread easily, especially with people who aren't vaccinated or haven't had measles before. And just a reminder, your symptoms can appear as early as 7 days after your exposure. Bakari?
Okay, CP24's Cedra Liu live from Trillium Health Partners in Mississauga. Thank you. Well, coming up next on CP24 Live at noon, the search to find a family doctor. It can be a very frustrating experience. After the break, we're going to look at a new report highlighting some of the stress that these physicians are facing and the impact on patients. The family doctor shortage is certainly being felt by both patients and physicians. Dr. Alan Grill joins us live with more on a new report that aims to put this situation into perspective. He's a family doctor and chief of family medicine at Oak Valley Health's Markham Stouffville Hospital. Dr. Grill, thanks for joining us. So let's start off with this data. Draw the correlation between the data and the role of family doctors.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me today. So the Ontario College of Family Physicians released some important data this week. And what it shows is that access to family physicians is far greater than a lot of other services that we see within the healthcare system. There's about 140,000 visits each day with family physicians across Ontario. And that's more than specialists, x-rays, other lab tests, et cetera. So we know that access to family physicians for patients is really important. The second thing that's a little bit concerning is that despite the fact that the population has increased by about, let's say, 30% in the last few years, the number of visits to family physicians really hasn't grown in the same proportion. And that's because a lot of family physicians, because of health system challenges we're facing, have sort of moved away from comprehensive primary care where, you're in an office, cradle to grave care, where you're seeing patients on a daily basis. And the fact that a lot of the patients we're seeing are becoming more complex. A quarter of our practices are probably people that are over 65. People are living longer, higher life expectancies. And those patients take more time. So the same patient that might have taken 15 minutes ago, 15 minutes 5 years ago, might take 20 or 25 minutes now. And if we don't correct some of the health system challenges that we're having so we can increase the supply of family physicians practicing comprehensive primary care, we're going to see this continue to decline, and it's going to really have a negative impact on patients.
Dr. Grill, what does it mean to be a family doctor today with respect to workload? Walk us through an average day.
Yeah, so, I love being a family physician. My colleagues that I speak to love what they do. We were trained to work with patients, take care of families, sort of build these lifelong relationships. And for those of us that work in an office-based setting, it's a busy day. You show up in the morning, you've got a bunch of appointments booked. These are problems that can range from chronic disease to prevention to mental health, all of those things. But on top of what we're doing in the office, we also have other responsibilities, right? Some of us work in hospitals, some of us work in the emergency room, we do long-term care. And if it was just a matter of seeing patients and doing what we love, what we were trained to do, to take care of people and make them better, it would be fine. But there's a lot of other burdens that we're facing. So there's a ton of administrative work. The Ontario College of Family Physicians has shown the data about 19 hours on average of a full-time family physician on things like paperwork, filling out forms, tracking down referrals. And this is not time that we're spending in front of patients. It's almost, 2 extra days a week of paperwork. And that leads to burnout and stress. I think the other thing that we know in Ontario is there isn't enough team-based primary care. So I work in a family health team where I have social workers to help me out with patients with mental health issues. I have a pharmacist to help me with patients who are on multiple medications and to tell me about some of the new diabetes meds and help manage those. And so I can sort of help share the load. And that opens up time for me to deal with more complex patients or even take on new ones. My colleagues in my department down the street who don't have those resources, they're working really hard and they can't expand. So when you put those two things together, and the fact that with inflation, our compensation hasn't kept up, and things like renting space and hiring staff are becoming more expensive, these are burdens that are being added on to our day that are already pretty complex with taking care of patients. And eventually, it becomes a bit of a problem. And I think that's what we're facing now in Ontario with the number of people practicing comprehensive family medicine.
And Dr. Grill, at the same time, there's still a number of Ontarians who do not have a family doctor. Let's talk about solutions here.
Yeah. So the solutions, I think, start with some of the health system challenges I just went over. So if you look at the administrative burden, here's a couple examples. It would be great if the Ministry of Health invested in a centralized referral system. Right now, the admin staff in our offices, they send our referrals out to specialists. They have to track down whether those referrals get accepted because specialists are busy as well. They have to figure out what to do if a referral isn't accepted, so they've got to resend it somewhere else. My staff could be spending their time doing a lot of other things with our patients to support them. Why not have a centralized referral system where we know the exact wait times that are available in the province? The Ministry of Health assigns every patient to their trained specialist, and then no one's competing with each other. The other thing is, in terms of administrative work, they just did a good thing where they sort of gave people more time off work before they had to come back with a sick note. To have these appointments where people coming in because they have to prove to their employer that they were sick and it takes up an appointment from somebody else, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. So looking at some of those administrative burdens and fixing them is really important. I think more investment in team-based care is key. Our government has started to do that with the Ontario Health Teams, but it's not going to service the 2.3 million people that don't have a family physician. So we need to put more investment in primary care, similar to what we do in acute care, because the more prevention that we do, the less people that are going to be burdened in the acute care system. And finally, as you know, there's arbitration going on right now because the Ontario Medical Association couldn't negotiate a deal with the Ministry of Health. And now they have a third-party arbitrator figuring out what the compensation picture looks like. I think family doctors would argue that they make a very good living and that they really love what they do. But they just want to make sure they feel valued for what they do. And again, when it becomes a real burden to keep up with the cost of inflation in running your office, and you don't control what your income is, this is why we have these negotiations. And I really hope that the OMA and the government can find that common ground so our colleagues can feel valued and continue to focus on what they love to do, which is taking care of patients and having that work-life balance that are going to keep them healthy along with those that they serve.
Okay, Dr. Alan Grill, family doctor and chief of family medicine at Oak Valley Health's Markham-Stouffville Hospital. Thank you.
Take care.
Well, a new COVID-19 subvariant has become the dominant strain in Canada. National wastewater data shows KP2 surpassed JN1 as the most common variant in the country at the end of April. It represents a little more than 30% of cases. It's made up of mutations that have accumulated over the course of the pandemic. The Omicron variant that sparked a wave of infections in 2022 is considered the parent of KP2. Infectious disease experts say there's no evidence it will have a serious overall impact. And as summer approaches, Food Banks Canada is gearing up to help those in need. The organization is holding a massive packing day at the International Centre today in order to help deliver meals to help children in need. This is part of the After the Bell program, which provides nutritious, child-friendly food packs throughout the summer when school center supports are not available. According to the company, 1 in 3 people who visit food banks are children. And the CEO of Food Banks Canada, Kristen Beardsley, joined us earlier to provide more information about the After the Bell program.
So with our After the Bell program, we gather together our corporate partners, the organizations that support our work, and we come together once a year to pack the After the Bell pack. So these are volunteers who've come together this morning. They're going to help us pack. Our goal is to get 200,000 healthy, child-friendly food packs out to communities from coast to coast to coast.
Okay, and right there you just heard her say the goal is to deliver 200,000 food packs. That's to over 200 communities. Well, PWHL Toronto is going to have another chance to advance to the final as the team gets set for Game 4 tonight in Minnesota.
Scoring chances, one just missed the net. There, Budarak feeds it down, now a chance. Flaherty, she scores!
Toronto's coming off a 2-0 loss on Monday, but still leads the best-of-5 series 2-1. All 3 games have been won by the home team in a shutout. Game 5 would be back here in Toronto on Friday night. And the winner of the series is going to play Boston, who won last night in overtime to sweep their series against Montreal. Well, Toronto will be without the league's leading scorer for the rest of the playoffs. The team has placed Natalie Spooner on long-term injured reserve. Spooner suffered a knee injury during the third period of Game 3 against Minnesota. The 33-year-old led the league with 20 goals and 27 points in 24 regular season games. She had 1 goal and 1 assist in 3 playoffs games. And thank you for watching CP24 Live at noon. Coming up after the break, thousands of customers are without power in downtown Toronto this afternoon. Stay with CP24 for the latest updates and other headlines coming up with Jamie Goodfriend.